In the year 1789, France stood on the edge of collapse. The kingdom was drowning in debt after years of costly wars and endless spending. While the monarchy continued to live in luxury, the people were starving. The price of bread, the most basic food for the poor, had risen so high that ordinary families could not afford even a single loaf. Children went to bed hungry and disease spread through the streets of Paris. Yet inside the golden halls of Versailles, King Louis XVI lived a life far removed from the suffering of his people. He spent his days hunting and indulging in comfort, while his Queen Marie Antoinette became a symbol of extravagance with her gowns, her jewelry, and her endless parties. Many saw her as arrogant and heartless. Some even claimed that when told the people had no bread, she replied, "Let them eat cake." Whether true or not, the phrase became a symbol of how distant the royals were from the misery of the nation. This anger among the poor grew stronger every day, and the voices of the people rose louder like thunder on the horizon. France was about to enter one of the bloodiest revolutions in human history. The breaking point came when King Louis XVI called for the Estates General, a meeting of representatives from the three estates: the clergy, the nobility, and the common people, known as the Third Estate. But the system was unfair because each estate had only one vote, which meant the nobles and clergy could always outvote the commoners, even though they represented more than 90% of the population. Frustrated and ignored, the Third Estate declared themselves the National Assembly, claiming that they now spoke for the people of France. This act of defiance was the spark that set the nation on fire on June 17, 1789. The revolution had officially begun soon after they gathered at a tennis court, where they swore an oath never to separate until a new constitution was created. This moment, known as the tennis court oath, became a symbol of unity and resistance against tyranny. From that day on, the old order began to crumble, and the people of France started to believe that they could shape their own destiny. As the National Assembly gained power, the people of Paris grew restless, fearing that the king would use force to shut them down. Anger and hunger filled the streets. On July 14, 1789, thousands of Parisians marched to the Bastille, a fortress prison that symbolized royal oppression. They demanded weapons and gunpowder, but when the guards resisted, the crowd stormed the fortress, killing the governor and tearing down the walls stone by stone. The fall of the Bastille became the ultimate symbol of the revolution, a cry for freedom that spread across the nation. Soon peasants in the countryside also rose up, attacking manors and destroying records of feudal debts. This wave of rebellion, known as the Great Fear, terrified the nobles and showed that the old feudal system was collapsing under the pressure of the people. The king was losing control, and the voice of the commoners could no longer be silenced. The revolution grew stronger, and all eyes turned to King Louis XVI, who was seen as the symbol of oppression. He was accused of betraying the people and secretly plotting with foreign monarchs. The king was put on trial, and history witnessed something shocking: the execution of a king by his own people. In January 1793, Louis XVI was led to the guillotine in Paris. The crowd filled the square with silence before erupting into cheers when the blade fell. This moment marked the end of absolute monarchy and the birth of a new era in France, yet it also unleashed fear, chaos, and endless bloodshed across the land. After the execution of King Louis XVI, France entered its darkest chapter, known as the Reign of Terror. Fear spread like wildfire across the nation, and anyone suspected of being an enemy of the revolution was hunted down. Led by Maximilien Robespierre and the radical Jacobins, the guillotine became a daily spectacle. Thousands of nobles, priests, and even ordinary citizens were accused of treason and swiftly executed in Paris. The blade never rested as carts filled with prisoners rolled through the streets. The air was heavy with suspicion. Neighbors turned against each other, families were destroyed, and no one was safe. What began as a revolution for freedom and justice had transformed into a nightmare of blood and fear. Robespierre believed terror was necessary to protect the revolution, but his grip on power grew harsher every day. His speeches echoed through the halls of the convention, promising virtue through fear, yet behind the words lay a city drowning in executions. The people who once cheered the fall of the king now lived in silence, knowing a single whisper could send them to the guillotine. This was the high price of revolution, where hope and horror walked hand in hand. By 1794, the revolution had devoured its own leaders. The reign of terror that Robespierre once justified began to turn against him. People whispered that he had become a dictator, hiding behind speeches of virtue but ruling with fear. The executions never stopped, and even fellow revolutionaries feared they would be next. The streets of Paris were restless. The citizens who once supported Robespierre now looked At him with suspicion in July, he stood before the convention delivering yet another speech promising to reveal new traitors, but this time the hall erupted with shouts. Against him, his enemies saw their chance and declared him an outlaw. The very guillotine he had used to silence thousands was waiting for him on the night of 27 July. Robespierre and his allies were arrested, chaos broke out, and he attempted to take his own life but failed. The next day he was dragged to the guillotine, his jaw shattered, his eyes filled with terror, and in a cruel twist of fate. He met the same end he had given to so many. With his death, the reign of terror ended, leaving France scarred but ready for a new chapter. With Robespierre gone, France was exhausted. The revolution had torn apart kings, priests, nobles, and even the revolutionaries themselves. Blood-stained the streets, and the people longed for stability in this chaos. A young general named Napoleon Bonaparte began to rise. He was brilliant, ambitious, and ruthless. The nation that once beheaded its king was now ready to follow a new leader. Not a monarch, but a soldier who promised order and glory. Napoleon would turn the shattered dream of liberty into an empire. His rise marked the end of the revolution and the beginning of a new era, one where the fate of Europe would be decided on battlefields under the shadow of his name. The French Revolution had burned like a fire, consuming everything in its path, but from its ashes, a new empire would rise.